It's pretty amazing how one single point of failure can bring a massive, and I mean massive, system to its knees. Today, we're going to explore just that, how a crisis in one tiny little shipping lane is creating this huge ripple effect with consequences that are, well, they're more vast and interconnected than you could possibly imagine. So let's trace that impact.
See this little sliver of blue on the map? That's the Strait of Hormuz. Now, from a global trade perspective, you've got to stop thinking of it as just water. It's really more like a vital artery for the entire world's economy. And when an artery like this gets clogged, well, as we're about to see, the fallout spreads in ways most of us would never, ever expect.
So the first ripple, it's the one that's direct and painful. It hits all of us right in the wallet through rising fuel prices. But the ripples, they don't stop there, not even close. They actually travel all the way to the top, and they start influencing where the world's richest people choose to live, and more importantly, where they park their money. And believe it or not, this same ripple effect reaches right down to the technology that we hold in our hands every single day. It exposes a kind of fragility we almost never think about. So, what's the connection? How does all this link up? Let's dive in.
This right here, this is a really stark assessment from the BBC's Frank Gardner. It just perfectly captures how serious this whole situation is. We're not talking about some political spat. This is a near-total shutdown of one of the planet's most critical economic choke points.
Right, so to really get a handle on the ripples, we have to start with the initial splash, the event that kicked this whole thing off.
The Strait of Hormuz is the world's busiest oil shipping channel. Just let that sink in for a second. A huge chunk of the energy that powers our cars, our homes, our entire industries, it all has to squeeze through this one narrow strait. Its location alone makes the global economy incredibly vulnerable to any kind of trouble here.
And trouble is exactly what happened. This timeline just shows how fast it all escalated. So on April 8th, you have this fragile 2-week ceasefire. Seems hopeful, right? Well, just 4 days later, on the 12th, the talks completely collapse. The result? Dueling blockades. Then, even with an extension on the 21st to try and find a way out, the very next day, Iran's Revolutionary Guard takes direct military action. In just 2 weeks, we went from a truce to an active shooting conflict. And on April 22nd, this thing got very, very real for the crews of these 3 ships. You had IRGC gunboats literally opening fire on the Greek-owned Epaminondas, causing heavy damage to its bridge. They also went after the Euphoria and the MSC Francesca. 2 of those ships were then seized and forced right into Iranian waters. The choke point was officially an active conflict zone.
So the first and most immediate ripple was, you guessed it, economic. And its effects were felt thousands and thousands of miles away from the Gulf. As a trade analyst, this number is just staggering. President Trump claimed the U.S. naval blockade was costing Iran $500 million every single day. This wasn't just a military move. This was pure economic warfare. It was designed to squeeze as hard as possible by cutting off a country's main source of cash. But that economic pressure, it didn't stay put. Far away in the UK, the inflation rate suddenly jumped to 3.3%. And the main reason? A huge surge in fuel prices, the biggest in over 3 years. This is a classic supply chain reaction. The moment a critical artery like Hormuz is threatened, that risk gets priced into the market immediately. And you and I, we feel it at the pump.
And this quote from the UK Chancellor Rachel Reeves really says it all, doesn't it? A geopolitical standoff in the Middle East directly translates into higher bills for regular families and businesses all over the world. It just proves that in our interconnected world, no major trade crisis is ever really just a local problem.
All right, the next ripple is a little more subtle, but it reveals this fascinating trend in how the super rich react when things get unstable.
For years, financial hubs in the Gulf, like Dubai, have been absolute magnets for global wealth. They were seen as stable, safe places to be. But with a hot conflict blowing up right on your doorstep, that perception, it starts to crumble. So the question becomes, if you're a high net worth individual, where do you go for safety?
And the answer, maybe surprisingly, is Italy. The country has basically been rolling out the red carpet for the global rich with an unbelievably attractive tax deal. A flat tax of just 300,000 euros a year on all your foreign income, no matter how many millions you make.
And what's so wild about this is just how huge the difference is. I mean, let's break it down. You compare Italy to a neighbor like France. Italy has no wealth tax. Its inheritance tax is just a fraction of the cost. And that flat fee on foreign income, for somebody earning millions, that is an absolute game changer.
This isn't about moving for the scenery. It's a cold, calculated financial move.
And this quote from Peter Ferrigno, whose company literally specializes in this stuff, connects all the dots for us. The longer the crisis in the Gulf drags on, the more a stable, tax-friendly place like Italy starts to look like the most logical option. The ripples from the Strait of Hormuz are literally redrawing the map of where global wealth chooses to live.
Okay, for our final ripple, we're going to make what might feel like a pretty big leap from global geopolitics to an object you probably have within arm's reach right now. But stick with me, because the connection here is direct and it's powerful. I just love this quote from Kyle Winus at iFixit. It's such a fun way to get us thinking about a piece of tech we all use, and let's be honest, we all abuse. And it turns out the way most of us break our cables is a perfect illustration of the exact same principle at play in the Strait of Hormuz.
Come on, we've all done this, right? Yanking the cord out of the wall, bending it at that crazy angle while you're using your phone in bed. Well, according to the experts, all these bad habits do the same thing. They concentrate all the stress on one tiny critical spot, the point where the flexible wire meets the rigid plug. It is, for all intents and purposes, the cable's own little choke point.
And that is the whole idea right there. Your cable's connector is its Strait of Hormuz. It's that one single tiny point of stress that decides whether the entire system works or completely fails. It doesn't matter if you strain it or blockade it. The result is the same. The flow of energy stops, dead in its tracks.
And that's really the big takeaway here. From a massive shipping channel that fuels the entire planet, all the way down to the simple wire that charges your phone, our modern life is built on this gigantic network of fragile connections, all these critical choke points.
So that leaves us with one final, and I think pretty crucial question. We've seen how fast the blockage of one waterway can screw up global prices, shift wealth around the globe, and even mirror the vulnerabilities we have in our own homes. So if one of these connections is this fragile, how truly resilient is the whole system that we all depend on every single day?